Well, good morning, everyone. My name is John Hudak. I'm the Director of the Office of Cannabis Policy and your moderator for today's event. On behalf of OCP, we thank you for being here for the first event of OCP's new Cannabis Conversations panel series. We're excited to be kicking off the series with a cannabis conversation on sustainability. As all of you know, the cannabis industry is very energy intensive. Costs are high currently. Sustainability and efficiency can create not just a better environment, but cost savings within the industry. In addition to things like energy costs, other harmful environmental impacts can stem from waste and excess packaging, et cetera. We know sustainability is a broad subject, and we're not going to be able to touch on everything today. But we do expect that this is the start of a continued conversation with more in-depth discussions to come. We're going to start off this morning's event with a moderated discussion, and then we'll take a few questions from the audience at the end. We do have a lot that we're trying to cover in 1 hour today, so I kindly ask that participants and panelists keep remarks and questions brief. I'm not a big fan of filibustering, and so I'm going to take the executive decision to cut people off if people begin to run on. That includes our panelists, but it also includes individuals in the audience asking questions. So with that being said, let's jump in and meet our panelists. Julie Churchill is the Director of Maine's DEP and their Office of Innovation and Assistance. In this role, Julie works to help businesses and individuals navigate the state's environmental regulatory process. She provides technical assistance and guidance to cannabis businesses on topics such as waste management. Mark King is an environmental specialist at Maine DEP and serves as the department's compost contact. He's helped several cannabis businesses across the state develop a composting process. Mark also serves as director of the Maine Compost School and actively participates in course instruction. Skip Sullivan is co-founder of High Tide Organic. He's a Maine licensee operating in both the medical and adult use cannabis programs. High Tide Organic is MOFCA certified and utilizes a number of different practices that help significantly reduce the company's environmental footprint. Most recently, High Tide Organic received the 2022 South Portland Sustainability Award. And finally, last but not least, Daniel Raynor works in Denver's Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency on the High Performance Buildings and Homes team as the industrial administrator for the Energize Denver Building Performance Policy. The focus of his work is increasing the efficiency of and decreasing the emissions from large manufacturing, agricultural, and industrial buildings in Denver. This includes cannabis growers, which account for approximately 20% of his covered buildings. Well, we really appreciate our panelists for being here today to share resources and talk more about best practices and sustainability within the cannabis industry. So let's jump into some questions. Julie and Mark, I want to start with you both first. Could you start us off with a deeper dive into the 3 prongs of sustainability and how they relate to the cannabis industry? And on top of that, what are you seeing as you work with Maine cannabis businesses in this context? Julie, do you want to go first, and then we'll kick to Mark?
Sure thing. Yeah. So, when you think about sustainability, you think about the environment, people, and your business are all in sync and are in harmony. That's the goal. That's the ultimate goal. So, each business should have sustainability goals. And the best way you can do that is by encouraging your employees, even if you just have a partner involved, but to think about what's important and utilize us. We have this fantastic new guidance sheet that OCP will be putting up, and we'd love to come out to your facility. And how about you, Mark? What do you want to say about this, what we've seen?
Well, I've been composting for over 30 years and doing a lot of technical assistance along the way. And I love this industry because there's so many opportunities for composting. I work with a lot of growers that end up with, stem stalks and root balls. And I'm trying to find a productive way to get that material composted and reincorporated either into the business or into community gardens or places where those nutrients can be used. So I see lots of opportunity.
Julie and Mark, thanks a ton. I think what you're highlighting really effectively is that while OCP is an important resource for the cannabis industry throughout the state. There are a lot of functions within state government outside of OCP that can provide some really important resources, information, et cetera, for cannabis businesses. And so we're hoping at OCP to help improve our ability to become a clearinghouse for those ideas and those contacts, but definitely reaching out to individual state agencies outside of OCP is really important. Skip, I'd like to jump to you next. Could you tell us a little bit more about the various ways you've worked sustainability into your business model at High Tide Organic? Skip, you're on mute.
Gotcha. Yeah, so when we founded High Tide, we knew that we wanted to build sustainability into the framework of the business from the ground up. So we started by focusing on resource consumption, and to that end, we've installed an irrigation system that is driven by sensors, and that's automated. So we're using much less water, and we're not watering to runoff, so we're not putting any runoff into drains, and we're reclaiming about 60% of the water that we're putting into our beds that the plants are growing in. We're reclaiming that, filtering it, reusing it, and we're able to do that without using a traditional reverse osmosis system, which would generate additional waste to create that water. We've also shifted to the use of an LED lighting system, and even within the LED sector, there are varying degrees of technology out there, and we chose a technology partner that basically the lights are powered by a remote power system. So in addition to the direct savings on the consumption of power between LED and like a high pressure sodium bulb, everything is powered from a network room. So we've eliminated additional heat generating sources like the ballast connected to the lights. And then we're also sort of the biggest cornerstone of our growing process is we're using a perpetual soil system. So we're never disposing of soil. We're continuing to amend. We test the soil. We give the soil what it needs. We're not using any bottled synthetic nutrients. And the soil that is in our building now has been here since we started our project back in 2020. And it just continues to get better and better. And that soil system with the worms that are in the soil allow us to maintain target CO2 levels without amending the rooms with any supplemental CO2. The soil is basically the soil, the worms, all of that activity in the soil is our primary CO2 source to help grow super robust plants.
So Skip, I've got a quick follow-up question for you, but before I jump into that, for our audience, I wanted to let you know that our team is posting some links in the chat function that reflects some of the conversation that's happening here, and it provides some resources for all of you outside and inside of OCP to help engage this conversation within your businesses. So Skip, one of the questions I wanted to follow up with is a concern that I hear from a lot of licensees, and that is that businesses that are sometimes operating at the margins from a profit perspective find it difficult to consider what are additional upfront costs to build sustainability into their business. Can you talk a little bit from your experience about the costs and benefits there that you've weighed in terms of introducing what are not necessarily the standard practices in the cannabis industry, but ones that are working for you?
Yeah, sure. So on the soil side, there's no doubt that the living soil kind of cultivation process requires a lot of front end work and labor to dial it in. But once it's once you have it where you want it, it's fairly low maintenance, and then we're not spending time disposing of soil. And and there are a couple of things too, like with our MOFCA certification, that has become a differentiator in the marketplace, and what is going to continue to be a more crowded marketplace as we move forward. So that certainly helped set us apart in the marketplace. And then one of the things I will say too is a lot of folks don't necessarily know that Efficiency Maine here in the state of Maine has opened up funds to be available to cannabis businesses. And so for us, when we were looking to invest in the LED technology that we chose, we chose a lighting technology partner who would actually help shepherd that process through to completion with Efficiency Maine. And we ended up getting a little over 50% of our project costs covered for that investment, and it started paying us back from day one. And then the one thing additional note, in an effort to keep the answers brief, the irrigation system to when you talk about sustainability, and the people that work here are a very big part of that, right? And so we were looking to not only find things that would make us a more sustainable operation from an environmental perspective, we were also looking for things that would remove some of the tedium of tasks that get to quality of life for the folks that work here, or our staff. And so things like our watering system, rather than spending hours a day putting water into these beds and then of course generating runoff, all of that is happening automatically so that the folks who work here can really focus on more qualitative tasks, which tend to be more enjoyable to do, and building a relationship with the plants that are actually in the facility and not just taking care of chores.
Thanks, Skip. And to follow up on a couple of the points that you made, Lisa has dropped into the chat links both for the indoor lighting incentives and the dehumidification system incentives that Efficiency Maine provides for the cannabis industry. Daniel, I want to go to you next. Can you tell us a little bit more about Denver's sustainability goals and the work that you've been doing with cannabis businesses to help achieve those goals? And to follow up on that, what are the best practices you've seen among Colorado cannabis businesses as they implement these ideas in this space?
Yeah, thank you, John. Good morning, everybody. So Denver has committed to being net zero energy in existing buildings and homes by 2040. So that also includes these large cannabis growers. As John mentioned in the introduction, I work with large manufacturing, agricultural, and industrial, MAI buildings for short, and approximately 1/5 of those are cannabis growers. So they represent a pretty large portion of my buildings, maybe in the range of 45 to 50 buildings. And something else that we're pretty sure we know is that cannabis growers account for approximately at least 5% of Denver's overall electricity usage for the entire city. So a relatively small number of buildings consumes a huge amount of energy. So to that end, we had this voter-approved initiative to set up our building performance standard in the city. So I believe Denver was the 5th city in the country to have a building performance standard. And as of June 29th, so less than 3 weeks ago, we passed the first building performance standard specific to manufacturing and agricultural buildings. So that was the culmination of over a year's worth of outreach and program design. And now we are switching into program implementation to try to make these large manufacturing buildings, including cannabis growers, more energy efficient. So a lot has been just kind of information gathering and program design. And as we're moving into implementation, it's going to be a lot more outreach and education and training for building owners and managers. In terms of, best practices, some things like right off the top of the bat, some low-hanging fruit. You can't improve what you don't measure. Studies show that benchmarking your energy usage on average can save you 7% on your energy bills just from measuring. And also having an energy manager in your facility who's just looking at these numbers and trying to see where little improvements can be made. Another great opportunity is getting an energy audit in your facility. I know here in Colorado, our energy company provides no cost energy audits to cannabis growers. So, maybe something like that is available in Maine. Also, the payback time on an energy audit is quite rapid because you learn so much about your building and low and no cost improvements that can be made. And then some kind of, big ticket items that are pretty true across most cannabis growers. Lighting takes a huge amount of energy from the overall pie. And we know that LED grow lights can save a huge amount of energy as well as cutting down on waste significantly. Some other big ticket items would be more efficient HVAC and dehumidification systems. Heat pumps are really great, and we're working to get the market and the workforce, up to speed to make sure that everybody can take advantage of this really cool, efficient technology. So it's kind of a pretty high-level overview of things we've been working on here.
Daniel, a quick follow-up question.
Yeah,
so I know there are several people in the audience who either represent municipalities, work in municipal government, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between your office and the state government and what sort of tips and tricks you might recommend if municipalities are looking to set up standards, offices like yours, et cetera, in terms of how they can best work with the state government?
Well, that's a loaded question. A good one though. So yeah, we there's so many levels of government, right? We're in the Denver municipality, so we're quite local and can work one-on-one with a lot of businesses. But then the state as a whole has their own sustainability initiatives. I will say that Denver is ahead of the curve when compared to the state of Colorado. So we are kind of, in a way, setting the precedent, and the state is kind of a few steps behind us in terms of program development. But yeah, something that's really been helpful to us is the fact that our program and our office was voter approved. So our building performance standard is a law. It's not something that buildings can opt out of. So, there's a bit of a stick there, but the carrot is that we have some really robust incentive and rebate programs locally. We have a lot of, we're doing a lot of electrification pilots, for example, especially for hard to electrify systems. The state has a bunch of programs, financing mechanisms, rebates, et cetera. And also, as I mentioned, our energy utility, Xcel Energy, has quite a slew of rebates and incentives available. They have their own sustainability goals that they have to hit, as defined by the PUC. So they, get the benefit from these large energy users becoming more efficient and reducing their energy demand. So it's really kind of finding ways where you can have that synergy between the different departments and their different goals, in order to, reach our environmental goals while also, achieving statutory intent of various rules and laws that have been passed at different levels of the government. And I won't even get into everything happening at the federal level, because that's a whole can of worms.
Well, thanks, Daniel. The next question I'm going to throw out to the whole panel. So whoever wants to jump in. It builds a little bit on the follow-up question that I asked Skip earlier. In your experience, what do you find is some of the biggest challenges or barriers to sustainability within the cannabis industry?
I'll jump in. I mean, generally it comes down to cost. I mean, the largest objection is, these businesses are generally working on fairly thin margins, contrary to what a lot of popular belief is out there, and without a lot of traditional financing options, it's a big first step to take. Like the Efficiency Maine program is great, but to get the money to support the project, you have to have completed the project. So you still have to find a way to upfront those costs so that you can then get the rebate. So I'd say that's the biggest objection. I will say though that if folks look at their business metrics. Like one of the things we did early on, speaking of, to Daniel's point about you can't impact something unless you measure it. One of the things that we do when we look at like even yields coming out of our facility is we look at, yield per square foot, yield per bed, all of that stuff. But we're also measuring yield per watt of power consumed. And because that gets directly to cost, it doesn't do you a lot of good if you're generating these huge yields, but there's a giant offset on the power you're consuming, which has a huge cost. So I would say spending time looking, doing a cost benefit analysis. And then like I said, I think the biggest barriers are just come down to that, the available incentives out there, and then figuring out a way to pay for your portion up front.
Anyone
Yeah,
else?
I would second, or, oh, sorry, John.
No, I was just
Okay.
saying who else wanted to speak.
Yeah, I definitely second everything Skip said. Financing is a really big challenge with this group, especially with the fact that cannabis is still illicit at the federal level. So most banks will not provide loans. So that's where hopefully, incentives and rebates from utilities and other organizations can come into play. I know in Denver, in the Denver region, we have one bank that will provide loans to cannabis growers. So it's cool to know that that exists, and hopefully more will come as more states and municipalities legalize recreational cannabis. I think also something that, shouldn't necessarily go unsaid is that inertia is a powerful force, and change is difficult for all of us. So just something like switching out your lighting, right? If you're used to using metal halides, or other kind of more energy intensive and waste intensive lighting, it's fine and dandy to tell somebody to switch to LEDs, but it does require some tuning. You have to like adjust your HVAC and your cooling load and whatnot, and your watering cycle. I'm sure Skip can speak to this a lot better than I can, but all that to say, change is a difficult thing. So coaching people through that is really helpful, I found.
Right. Julie or Mark, just wanted to see if you had anything to add. No? Julie, you're on mute.
No, I think, Skip really spoke very well about it. And, I think that really, if you're not measuring it, all this can be expensive. And so wastewater, energy, your waste material, recapturing it, not generating it to begin with. We'd love to do a case study on Skip's business, as a matter of fact. But anyways, that's really, I'm just a talking head here, So we definitely want to provide more assistance and get, everybody's process, soup to nuts, more in a sustainable direction.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add to that when we come in and we talk to a facility about doing composting, a lot of it is the disbelief that it's so easy to accomplish it, but it really truly is that easy, and it's very cost effective, and the end product has a desirability to someone. So it's a great way to transform your waste into a resource.
So to build on this a little bit, and again, Skip and Daniel touched on this a bit, I want to talk a little about the intersection between sustainability and profitability. If you're building sustainable practices into your business, you might not realize immediate increased profitability, but in the medium to long term, you really have the opportunity to do that. And so can each of you talk, and maybe start with Julie and Mark, because this type of conversation, I think, is a difficult one for state officials to have with businesses. As Julie said, I'm a talking head. I'm a talking head too. I don't own a cannabis business, and so the ability for the rubber to meet the road, from my perspective, is a bit limited. But in terms of having that conversation about the payoffs of introducing these practices, rather than a business just hearing sustainability and thinking increased cost, increased cost, increased cost. How have you seen that conversation play out? And then for Skip and Daniel, if you want to provide some additional parts of that conversation as well.
Yeah, I think it's really on, payback. You have to really, and I've encouraged people to use their waste management plan and turn it into a sustainability plan. Use all that, work you did describing your process and where your waste is going. Well, there's a perfect opportunity to identify and say, why are we generating this waste? Why isn't this waste a commodity, which it can be? You could sell your compost, you could give it away rather than pay for the tipping fees. Why are we using so much wastewater? Why are we using so much electricity? So getting back to measuring, documenting, and then watching your progress over the year, revisiting that, like an environmental management system. Your waste management plan could be your green plan, could be your sustainability plan that you revisit with your employees. And Skip really talked about that. You've got some high value employees in there working on this high value content of material. And you want them, nurturing these plants that are going to generate a lot of economic benefit to them. So that kind of thinking, and you can do that by teamwork and having a green team, having a sustainability team.
Mark, any follow-up?
No, I think she's right on the head. And I know one thing I learned very early on in this industry as we were touring around finding ways to help is any chance that you can recover any usable asset and reuse it again is really great. I know one of the things that we saw was the ability to recover some of the extracting agents and give them a second go around because they're so expensive, and storing them on site can be problematic. But if you store less and use them again, all of a sudden you're not only saving money, but you're reducing your footprint of what you're storing on site too.
Skipper Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, I would say too, the entire when somebody who's got wearing a lot of hats, which a lot of us cannabis business owners are, the process to kind of conceptualize those first steps can be fairly overwhelming. So one of the things that I would suggest is lean into seek out and lean into strategic partners that have incentive to help you get there, and use those folks to fill in the gaps on expertise. Like I was saying, like our lighting partner, TSR, helped tremendously in getting us to the finish line on the Efficiency Maine process. On the waste management aside, for the waste that we're generating that we're not able to immediately reuse ourselves, and we've got a composting plan on our roadmap for the future. We found a company, Waste, here in Maine, that's locally owned, and they come and take the waste out of our building, and they have a process to turn that waste into biochar, and do all of the tracking that OCP requires on the regulatory side. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really about leaning into the resources that are out there, but that starts with actually understanding what those resources are and how to seek them out.
Yeah, I agree with everything that everybody said. And one kind of point that I'll add is that I don't know if we'll ever get to a point where everybody agrees on the importance of sustainability and on combating climate change and taking climate action. But I think that's something that everybody can agree on, is that saving money is a positive, and improving profit margins is something that every business strives for. So, for example, in Denver, we have this goal for the sector to improve their energy performance 30% between now and 2030, which is a pretty ambitious goal, but the technology and the resources are there. And at the end of the day, if you're saving 30% on your humongous energy bills, or producing 30% more product for the same cost of operation, it's kind of a win-win for everybody, in my opinion. It's a win for the business to save money and be more efficient. It's a win for the utility to have less stress on the grid, for example. And it's a win for the environment to have a product that's less impactful and has less of a direct effect on our warming climate. So I definitely think sustainability and profitability go quite hand in hand.
One thing, if I could just add one additional quick point, one of the things that a lot of growers got kind of caught flat-footed by, from last year into this year, and if people had a crystal ball, it would have been an immediate case for leaning into sustainability, especially on the energy consumption side, is a lot of folks, I've just generally everybody in the state was faced with what amounted to a 47% increase in electricity rates going from 2022 into 2023. So if the switch to LED, as an example, would you get you 34% of that back off the top before you consider, things like savings on HVAC loading, but just direct energy costs. That goes a lot of the way towards paying that back, and that was something that every grower in the state here in Maine is faced with. Those huge rate increases, I suspect, either put some folks out of business or nearly put some folks out of business, and it's our, aside from, our direct facility cost, energy consumption is our single largest expense in doing what we do.
Thank you all. I've got one more question before we open it up to audience questions. We've talked a bit about how businesses can start today to reduce their environmental footprint with some of the practices and the programs we've discussed. But what do you think is, some of the biggest mistakes that cannabis businesses make that accidentally increase their footprint, their environmental footprint?
I could jump in. I don't want to hog up all the time, but I would say that a big mistake that I think a lot of folks make, and even we made very early on, was thinking that there's like a right way to do things in this industry. Like there's a way that you have to cultivate cannabis as a commercial product, particularly in an indoor environment. And there are a ton of forums out there that people read, and there's this reinforcement that you have to do it a certain way. And I think that can be very dangerous. I mean, one of the things, again, early on, that we just did a tremendous amount of research and reading and talking to folks and visiting other facilities. And, it's if you start with the goal, and then reverse engineer back to your process, that was a huge tipping point for us in terms of getting there. Yeah, so I would say that. And a lot of folks, they think we have to feed plants this way, we have to use a soilless medium because we've got concerns about passing testing, and it's there are a whole bunch of things that if you just take a step back and start with your goal and then get back and figure out how can I get through these hurdles and still hit that goal of focus on sustainability. I mean, I think that's pretty key.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another mistake is to assume that there is a one-size-fits-all approach, and there really isn't. Every facility is different, and that's no different for cannabis growers. So at the risk of sounding like a broken record, things that people can do today, really start measuring your energy usage, your water usage, your waste production, and have some kind of environmental or energy manager on staff who's in charge of just monitoring that, looking at those numbers. And then start thinking about, what you can do in your facility to really make some improvements, get an energy audit or some other kind of environmental audit, and see what kind of solutions are available. You got to start somewhere, and those are some pretty good places to start.
I think I have one more thing to add, and that is, instead of fearing the state agencies that might regulate you, reach out to them first. Before you even start, give them an idea of what you're trying to build, how much waste you're going to produce, where it's going to go, And believe it or not, they'll actually give you helpful suggestions to keep you from getting into trouble.
Yeah, I would absolutely second that. You know, given the kind of industry we're in, there's sort of this, you know, assumption that a lot of us might walk around with, that to talk to an agency that could provide aid is somehow exposing us to scrutiny or criticism. I mean, the reality is we all need each other to be successful, right? I mean, this industry, the regulators need us to maintain the industry that has been built, and we need the regulators for guidance and state agencies that can help. And yeah, that's something that I think we all struggle with, and I would encourage folks to lean into those organizations that can provide assistance, and it's absolutely a mistake not to. And then the other thing I'll say, and this is kind of a cliche, is it's the whole notion of not letting perfection get in the way of progress. The way to start on a path to sustainability is to take the first steps, and don't let the finish line be so overwhelming that it gets in the way of taking those first incremental steps, because you can immediately have gains both on environmental impact and on cost by just taking those first initial few steps.
Absolutely. Incremental progress is still great progress.
Progress, yeah.
Julie, did you have a follow-up there?
Right. And I just wanted to like make another point that everybody's made, but I mean, just even like our relationship with DEA, you know, we got in writing, like, I think it was in 2020, that really enabled us to push composting and promote it more with this industry. And we still run into people that are taking their stalks, their stems, their materials, and they're wasting them. They're throwing them in the dumpster. They're putting bleach on them, is what, you know, DEA had told the medical marijuana to do, which was, you know, fine. But that they don't have to do that. They can contact us. We can set up composting. And this whole sheet, you know, please look at it, because it doesn't mean you have to compost necessarily on site. It doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to use it. You're just going to save on costs. You're going to help the environment. Your employees are going to go, wow, that's cool. They really care about the environment and they care about us. So, you know, it's all about that, and not, you know, just having those goals and keep going on them and contact us.
Two really quick highlights on composting. If you compost your residue on site, it doesn't require any special extra effort to make it unusable. If you ship it off site to go to a transfer station or somewhere else, you have to render it unusable at that point before it leaves your site. And all that means is we mix it with horse manure, and nobody really wants to smoke it after that. So bottom line is, those are the things that we help you set up. And the way we've written the guidelines is that it's treated as leaf and yard. So it can go to any licensed facility that composts leaf and yard, or you can do it on site.
Great, thanks everyone. And thanks to the panel so far with those answers to the questions. Just a reminder, our team is putting links to important information in the chat. And Lisa has also shared the contact information for our 4 panelists today. We're going to take some questions from the audience now. You can submit your questions in writing, or you can use the raise hand feature and I'll call on you. If we call on you, keep your question brief. As I noted before, remember to unmute yourself, and if possible, turn your camera on, and please introduce yourself as you ask the question. We'd like to get through as many questions as possible. We've got about 20 minutes left. The first question we had in writing, and it follows up a bit on the answer you gave a moment ago, Skip, about testing parameters and the relationship with sustainability. So this question comes from Natasha Johnson. She asks, can you talk about how the microbial testing parameters of the final product can impact sustainable cultivation techniques, and what cultivators should keep in mind regarding that?
Yeah, sure. So from my perspective, and we've been cultivating the way that we've been cultivating for a number of years now, but you know, what it requires, and it's really just good practice for any kind of business, even folks using a more traditional commercial cultivation methodology, and that's just good process around care and handling, making sure that everybody that's working in a cultivation room is wearing gloves, and that they're not interacting with the soil and then making contact with the plants. All of my, conversations with the various testing labs in the state, one of, their bits of feedback to me as we've had conversations was that most of the issues that they see with folks having problems with testing is generally contact contamination. It's not so much environmental, it's contact. And then it's really just keeping, it's more important in an agricultural operation, which is prone to being just a little messier by nature, because you're doing what is traditionally with an indoor cultivation facility, what is traditionally meant as an outdoor activity indoors. And so sanitation is critical. You need to keep your space clean and tidy and neat so that you can see outlier conditions that you need to address. So yeah. I mean, I think the microbial testing requirements are certainly a legitimate concern, but again, it just means that you have to take greater care and caution in how you're handling it and in the training of staff that are working in those rooms.
Yep. A reminder: if you have questions that you want to post, you can use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Next to the chat box, or you can virtually raise your hand, or if your camera's on, physically raise your hand. The virtually raising your hand button will help me see you a little bit easier. And so please feel free to jump in with questions. I'm just reading in my chat, so give me 1 second. Excellent. Kevin Bernard, did you have your hand up physically have your hand up a second ago, or did my eyes lie to me?
No, but I do have a question.
Perfect.
I'd like to speak to Skip. I'm wondering if, because you're MOFGA certified and have such sustainability practices, if you're noticing a premium pricing in a branding that actually pays back for some of the work that you do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I will say, so particularly on the adult use side, so on the medical side of cultivation, I think there are currently 17 or 18 cultivators that have the MOFGA clean cannabis certification. On the adult use side, we're one of 3. And it certainly has helped inoculate us from the sort of the cycles of supply and demand issues. We're finding our products are generally in high demand, and it's not that we don't have to be cognizant of price, but we've been able to hold our pricing at a steady level, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we are able to say that our product is produced organically, and that part of our message is that we're also doing that sustainably. And those two things, they're not necessarily the organics and sustainability don't by definition necessarily always go hand in hand, but they are kind of two sides of the same coin. And yeah, it definitely helps in the marketplace. And it's a great story to be able to tell our retail partners as we're building that initial relationship with folks.
That's great. I just to follow up with one other question is, I make biochar from everything that I collect in the business, and I'm wondering if there's much attention being paid to the use of biochar, specifically to Mark, perhaps in the composting, and does it differentiate the compost quality or different uses?
That's a really great question. And the answer is what studies I have seen, it actually improves it. It's another layer to the composting process. The whole key with compost is that it's not a fertilizer, but it's a very stingy micronutrient ATM. In other words, you'll get several years of nutrient release out of the compost over time. And what biochar does is it just helps make that a little bit better. So short of doing some trials with it, I just have anecdotal information that it works super well. A facility down in Tennessee called Wampler Sausage actually makes sawgrass biochar, and then they compost it, and they've had huge success with that product.
All right. Thank you, everyone. A reminder, drop any questions that you have in the Q&A function, or virtually raise your hand, and we'll be happy to get to your questions. One that has come in the Q&A chat so far is from, apologies for probably slaughtering your name, Aria Karinsky. And Aria asks, is anyone partnering with the paper industry? We generate tons of fiber.
Yeah. I can talk a little bit about that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know of anyone that is. I know that there's definitely a way that you can have it tested. Let's say, like, Sappi did take back when marijuana was not legal. They would put it into their biomass, but they're not utilizing the material for making paper that I know in Maine. However, the University of Maine has incredible testing abilities, and I've done 20 years ago work with the boat industry of Maine, and we've made a lot of progress with compost and chemical reductions and that kind of thing. So we could, you could talk to me if no one else has anything else to add to this. That's one suggestion I would have, is that there might be a marketable or a place for it to be utilized that in paper or packaging, for sure. And maybe UMaine would be one of our partners in this venture to look at it and do some bench tests on it.
Thanks, Julie. I've got a question for the group. This is mine, not from anyone else in particular. Are you seeing, and I guess I know, Skip, that businesses are constantly talking about this. I've been to trade shows and conferences where businesses are sharing new techniques, new ideas, et cetera. But my question is for Julie, Mark, and Daniel. Are you finding that among your peers in other states, and in Daniel's case, peers in other cities, that the conversation around sustainability in cannabis is an increasing one? There's a lot more conversation about this. Can you talk a little bit about what those conversations with peer governments have been like over the past few years?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. I've interfaced with a lot of composters all across the country, and Colorado was a really big one that kind of got things fired up. But I'm hearing from a lot of the other major states as well, and there's great interest because as this industry grows, it's growing so quickly that sometimes it's outrunning the knowledge that's available. And one of my favorite military phrases is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And so a lot of the states are trying to run ahead to regulate as opposed to just have a communication. So one of the things that I see from the industry is they want more and more discussions of how they can grow naturally, but yet not grow unsustainably. And so it's becoming a really big issue. And I suspect it'll become even bigger as time goes on, as these facilities grow and grow and grow.
Yeah, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're the first jurisdiction to actually have a performance standard for cannabis growing buildings. So I suspect it'll be other cities and jurisdictions reaching out to us, for kind of how to get started with that as time goes on. But in a lot of ways, the leaders have been the large cannabis growers, especially those businesses that have been able to grow and open up new facilities and whatnot. They see, from my experience and my conversations, the benefit in being more sustainable and more efficient, because that allows them to grow their footprint, produce more product, and just be more competitive in the industry. that, goes back to the sustainability and profitability going hand in hand.
And Daniel, I assume that if municipalities in Maine are looking to set standards, create programs, et cetera, you and your team would be happy to hop on a conversation and build that out, help build that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to talk to everybody and anybody.
Excellent. Just wanted to see if anyone else has any additional questions. One of the items I want to discuss is, I've been in this role now for almost 7 months, and one of the items that I focused on out of the gate is regulatory look back in our agency to see where we can improve regulations, get rid of overlapping ones, confusing ones, et cetera. And we're going to be engaging in rulemaking this fall for both the medical and the adult use programs. And sustainability is one of the issues that we've kept an eye on in thinking through different aspects of regulatory changes in the ways that we can create those efficiencies or encourage better behaviors related to sustainability within the industry. Ben Edwards, question, if you want to unmute, turn your camera on if possible, and introduce yourself.
Sure. Hey, John. Sorry. I hope you guys can all forgive my crazy appearance. I am a farmer, and the weather's been kind of crazy. I didn't plan on hopping on here, so you have to forgive. I just got out of the tractor about 20 minutes ago. But I guess since we had a couple of minutes, I did want to just throw out an idea. Thinking, Skip, after listening to you talk about kind of thinking out of the box and seeing that there are some municipal officers on here. I would love to see municipalities, the state, et cetera, help encourage growing outdoors. I mean, talking to me about growing indoors, I understand it's part of our industry, but to me, it's optimizing a very imperfect way to grow. And I mean, I undertook a bit of a study a few years ago about my environmental impact versus some of our medical marijuana partners. And I can grow a gram of CBD or a gram of THC. So we're talking the very final end thing that we're growing. So the actual cannabinoid, I can produce that with about 4% the energy that you can inside. So that's a 96% reduction. So I love hearing about LEDs where you can cut things down some and all these other practices. But to me, the wholesale big game-changing thing is to shift some of this growing outdoors. I know there's arguments that the product is not as good. Maybe this is product that only goes into concentrates or something like that. But it's game-changing if you're looking at our carbon footprint, our energy consumption, things like that, and costs of production. So I'd love to see, for example, OCP. Your cost to grow per area is half for outdoor what it is for indoor. But indoor can grow, say, 5 crops in a year, where outdoor can only grow 1. So if you could just adjust things a bit to kind of maybe level the playing field so that your licensing costs are comparable per grow, even little things that would encourage a little bit of a shift to outdoor, I think would have a massive impact on the overall sustainability of the entire program. And I know, Daniel, it's cool to see you're from Colorado. A lot of the research is coming out from Colorado about just how egregious this industry is from an environmental perspective. So I would just love to maybe it's a different perspective and maybe something somebody could consider. It would be great. Thanks.
I appreciate Ben for that question and comment. Any reactions from the panel? I want to give you guys an opportunity if you do.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I 100% agree with everything you said about, it's objectively a more efficient, more sustainable way to produce the product. I think one of the challenges that, particularly here in Maine that we face, aside from the single season is, somebody's question earlier about passing testing. I think that outdoor grown flower based on the adult use testing requirements is a bit more of a challenge for folks. I think, I've talked to a number of outdoor growers who have been surprised to find that the product that they produce, which by all objective measures looks beautiful, sellable, they have challenges passing that what is currently the adult use testing standards. So I think that's obviously a consideration. And then again, the single season. And then the other thing is persuading the marketplace, because unfortunately, you know, I guess good or bad, the marketplace determines the value of a product, and it takes retailers getting on board to not lean away from sun-grown flower as a lower quality product, but to lean into sun-grown flower as a more sustainable product. It's kind of, you know, the tail wagging the dog. You know, I think getting buy-in from retailers to get over that objection is key, and then educating the folks, the consumers who are actually buying the product, because there is this, you know, I would argue that I personally don't think sun-grown flower is of a lower quality than indoor flower. With indoor grown flower, you have a lot more control maybe over the process, because you're controlling to a large extent the environment. Yeah, it's been hammered into the consumer that that sun-grown flower is a product to be discounted, while indoor grown flower is a product that commands a higher price. And you know, I think that's where the educational component has to start.
Yeah, I agree, Skip. I mean, I think that this is kind of a long conversation that needs to be started. That's why I was kind of throwing it out there to municipalities and whatever. I mean, it is a marketing effort that needs to be undertaken. It is a big issue, and that's why I was throwing out there that maybe it's just something that's used in concentrates and things like that. But it
Precisely.
And it's on the testing. I mean, we do full panel testing, same as what's required for adult use for all of our outdoor hemp. And so we see about 85% of our flower would pass adult use. So about 15% wouldn't. So it's, I mean, that is obviously an issue if, you know, you're losing 15% of your crop. But it is possible.
Absolutely.
And, you know, 85% is not bad. And perhaps there are things that OCP should be looking at with these testing requirements for outdoor flower. A small amount of margin would make things completely different. And that's, again, where I was kind of throwing that out there to the municipal officers that are on this call. That, like, if there are some things that can be done to make some small changes in the incentives in the system, it could change the amount of people that are growing, or even greenhouse. I mean, we also greenhouse grow, and our greenhouse grow is a completely controlled greenhouse. So it's not, the doors aren't open or whatever. It's essentially a building with a clear roof. And we're about 40% of the energy consumption in our greenhouse that an indoor grower is. And that's a 60% reduction. And that's also massive. That's not incremental, like that's game changing. So I would just love to see some incentives set up to kind of shift things that direction. It could quickly shift the consumption of the entire industry.
Thanks, Ben.
But yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, I was saying thank you. I really appreciate that input. I'm gonna wrap us here as a little bit of a I guess bit of trivia for all of you as we talk about energy consumption. Just the cannabis businesses in CMP's area in the state of Maine. In 2022, cannabis businesses under CMP used 127 million kilowatt hours, which is a pretty huge footprint for a relatively small number of operators in the state. But on that note, I want to thank our panelists and thank our audience for what has been a really engaging conversation. We're going to continue conversations about sustainability moving into the future. As I said, this is one step in a journey on a really important issue that we, of course, can't tackle all of the areas of it in 1 hour. So stay tuned for future programming on that. As I said in the beginning, we are open to a lot of ideas, and we like hearing from you, whether it's in forums like this or in other contexts. We're going to have future cannabis conversation panels on other industry-specific topics, including safe storage, testing in the medical program, banking policy, etc. So stay tuned for announcements from OCP on those future events. Your feedback is really important to us. Sorry, my light keeps going off. A little energy sustainability in OCP's office. We need your feedback for future events. So please take our post-event survey linked in the chat. We'll also send out an email to all of the participants to see what your interest is in future programming. So thanks a ton to everyone, and we'll see you at our next panel.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.